originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. I am super excited to have back in our studio today, Mr. Bruce Pulver. Welcome back, Bruce.
Thanks for having me back, Matt. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Our last conversation.
Oh, it was great. It was great. And for those of you guys that missed the last conversation, I highly encourage you, before you listen to this episode, go back to the first episode between Bruce and I. And on that last episode, just to give you a little teaser about what we learned. First of all, we learned this guy is the Yoda of words and wordsmithing and really how words really do have an impact on us and how they tug both at our heart and our mind. He's an author. He's a speaker, a TEDxer, if you will, podcast host. He has his own podcast, which I don't think I mentioned on my last episode. I want to make sure I touch that for you. And kind of what I call a consulting coach that teaches his audience and clients how our words have a profound impact just on our mindsets and really have a profound impact on those around us. So us first and then those around us. He has a best-selling book we learned about, Above the Chatter, Our Words Matter, Powerful Words That Changed My Life Forever. And the concepts that are inside that book are really the foundation for all of his messages. And we learned a little bit about Bruce's background and his upbringing, but we're going to go a little deeper today. We're going to dive in a little bit, learn about your family, and just get up close and personal. I kind of wish we had like a little fireplace here. We could, pour ourselves another cup of coffee and sit around the fireplace and talk about it. So let's visualize that in our head. So as we get started, rapid fire round for you.
All right.
A couple of quick questions. What's your favorite food?
Seafood.
Seafood. Is there particular type?
Grew up in the west coast of Florida, so anything that comes out of the ocean or the Gulf,
Grouper's probably my favorite coming out of that area, but any of that. Favorite hobby?
Golf,
okay. Has that always been a big hobby of yours, or was that later in life into adulthood?
Started playing in college, yeah.
Okay, you started playing in college, yeah, okay. Favorite movie? Tombstone. And if there was a movie about you in your life, who would play you?
Bradley Cooper,
okay. Very good. Yeah, great. Awesome. I love that. So another thing, and I was thinking you might say your favorite hobby was going to be drumming or percussion. Golf, though, I love golf too. But that's one thing that Bruce and I have in common is we're both percussionists. And at one point in time, we joked earlier about maybe we'll have a podcast around all the little geekiness and cool things that we think are cool about drumming and percussion and music. So that's to be determined and well, maybe not to be determined. Maybe that's to come. So our audience probably will shrink quite a bit on that podcast. That's okay. That's all right.
We would dig it.
We would dig it totally. All right, so let's kind of dial it back, and I think just sharing with the audience, for those that listened to the first episode, and I did a recap of things we talked about, but just share a little bit about your family. So where did you grow up, siblings, and then maybe share about your wife, children today, and
So. As we talked earlier, right, I was born in Connecticut. Thank goodness we were close to the New Haven Medical Center where my mom's miracle surgery occurred in Alice. So, but I had a grandmother. My mom's mom was in the west coast of Florida in St. Petersburg, right? Everybody has a grandparent in Florida.
Right? Yeah, that's
so,
right.
She was getting older, and so the family decided to move to the Tampa Bay area. So that's really where I grew up and was exposed to the music, the Scottish style of music, a small town called Dunedin, to baseball, where there was just an incredible amount of talent, coaching, and parent and coach involvement. And of course, the beaches and the water was awesome. So that was really my kind of upbringing environment. I've got an older brother, very different. He's insanely technically mechanical.
Okay.
So the way we describe ourselves is I break things and he fixes things.
He's an engineer brain, perhaps.
He absolutely is mechanical engineering brain guy, a couple years older than me, Eagle Scout. He went down that path of that journey. Parents both passed. My mom lived until I was 22, so we kind of told that story of her survival.
Yeah, you did.
And father, who loved words and kind of inherited that from him, he died pretty early at age 66. He had a heart surgery, and then some dementia things that came on, and now we lost him pretty young. So, but they're still pouring into me, even though they're gone. The lessons just are so applicable. Of course,
Oh, I mean, the impact the impact that our parents have, whether it's negative or whether it's positive, it is the most profound impact on any child.
Absolutely.
It really is. Whether we realize it or not at the time, in fact, we don't realize it when we're younger. It's not until later in life. And sometimes that's unfortunate. Sometimes it's unfortunate that we don't realize the profound impact that our parents had on us, particularly if they're good things, later on. And sometimes they've gone, passed on.
And mine was, I realized it later, such a blessing, right? You only grow up in the four walls of your own home. So you don't really know what your neighbor or your friend or your baseball teammate or, your volleyball companion or your bandmate, what theirs was like. So I've only realized the blessing of that upbringing, even though it ended rather young. I never got to meet my children. That impact had on me, and I really cherish and value that. Try to channel that, if you will,
of course,
as best I can in all the engagements that I do.
Yeah, that's great. And so talk about your family now, your wife, your children. You have two girls?
Two daughters, my wife, Bridget, and I, we married, I better get it right, 1994, New Year's Eve. So that's kind of hard to remember the years, right? Because the date, I've got a 25-year-old and 22-year-old daughters.
Okay.
Oldest just finished her doctorate in physical therapy. So she's in the medical industry as a physical therapist, and the youngest is wrapping up her time at University of Georgia as well. Both went there, and she's wrapping up her soccer career and is actually doing some management on the soccer team now. So she's got another semester to go, and she'll be done.
Nice. And so, what does she? What is she like? Her next?
Yeah, it's kind of to be determined. The next semester, she'll continue doing kind of some internship around the program, and there's a lot around sports that she loves. She loves the mental side of the game. And so we talk an awful lot about that. So that's pretty inspiring.
A little bit from Dad, maybe.
We spent a lot of time in hotel rooms across the country traveling, right, with soccer, and you got to get your head ready for the game. And we would just, have breakfast and kind of course, I'd be geeking her out a little bit too much. Like, come on, Dad, easy. It's just a game. But we kind, I think a lot of that has absorbed, and we just love to talk about, challenging times in a match, right? Getting yourself ready by practicing the time when there's 5 minutes left and everybody's gassed.
Yeah.
That's where you want to be. And just kind of getting your mindset in a place. No doubt. And it's really, as much mental fitness in a sport like that as it is physical fitness. And I think that's something that she'll look into.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt at the highest level, and even a step down from professional at the collegiate level, and even at the pre-collegiate level, high school at the high levels of any sport, it's really between the ears, right? The mental fitness versus, right. I mean, because at that level, if people are still playing sports well into high school and they're playing at a high level and certainly going to college, they're physically fit. Right, it's the big difference makers or the mental fitness. You talked about the times that you've spent with your daughter in this case, and when you guys were on the road, and just times you spent with your family, and really I look at our responsibility as fathers, and if as a father, and if we're and whether we're a mother or a father, but our responsibility as parents. And then responsibility of leaders in looking at setting examples for youth so that we can inspire future leaders. So was there someone, though, for you and where you're at today and where you find yourself in your youth that set an example for you as a leader, or maybe spoken to you, or as you look back and reflect back, say, I didn't know it at the time, but this person really was shaping me, similar to what you've been doing perhaps with your children?
If I think back, music became a big part of my life. Music and baseball, the two things growing up. Yeah. And middle school band director was like super high expectations, right? He'd bring a guest conductor in and he'd say things like this: okay, Mr. Smith is going to come in and guest conduct you today. He's pretty important. when he says jump on the way up, ask him how high.
Yeah.
Like the respect factor of he just burned that into us. As I mentioned, the town I grew up in is a small Scottish town, Dunedin, Florida, and it was bagpipes, it was kilts, it was spats, it was leather shoes, and you shined them. I mean, they looked at the tip of your shoes, and you were doing that in middle school from a discipline perspective. So I would say that, and then from a baseball perspective, I had an amazing opportunity to play for a guy named Tim Wilkin. And Tim Wilkin has gone on, and he's now with the Arizona Diamondbacks organization as a general manager, assistant. Yeah. But Tim taught me, everybody grew and Bruce didn't grow, right? So when I'm 13 and 14 and still playing, it's like, Bruce, I need you second in the lineup, not fourth. Mm-hmm. I need you to move from third base to second base. I need you to come in behind the starting pitchers. Mm-hmm. And it was about playing the role. Mm. And so from a leadership perspective, there's always the spotlight. Someone's going to get credit for it, whether it's the sales awards club or whether it's the growth of the merger or whatever that is. But what I understood through that process is he recognized that everyone that participated had a valuable role. Yeah. And I think
that imparting that and helping you or those people understand that role, how important that role is.
Absolutely. So when we talk about kids and raising your children, right? My oldest daughter was a volleyball player, and she was a setter her entire middle school career and into high school, and she's 5'2". Yeah. So when you get to, that level and, later in high school and even wanting to go beyond, that's not a position that you're going to play at 5'2".
Yeah.
So just in chatting with her and talking to her, trying to set examples, it's like, well, get in where you can fit in and where you're going to contribute the most. So sometimes you're going to be the rock star in the front, but sometimes you're the drummer, right? Like we talked about, and your role is very different. Yeah. And I think recognizing that as a leader and putting that in your children that,
no doubt,
just because someone's got 20 home runs doesn't mean that you didn't, turn that double play.
No.
So don't compare
to
anyone else.
Yeah.
Compare to what you're doing today and tomorrow, because all those roles, if you only had home run hitters, what would happen?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
no doubt.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and we talk about that a lot, even in the sports teams and my son's teams that I coach, but within my own organization, how important it is for each person to understand how incredibly valuable their individual role is, because it's like a puzzle piece, right? Or like a puzzle, I should say. I mean, if all the pieces aren't fitting together or aren't doing their job, we can't complete the picture. Or I like to use the analogy of a clock or a watch.
Yeah. And I think there's two parts to that. There's the leader who needs to impart that.
True. And
then there's the member, colleague, whatever term you want to use, that needs to be able to embrace that. And so I don't think I do think it's really a two-way street there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a good segue. I've got a question, and this comes up a lot when I talk with people, sometimes in my organization, sometimes friends. I have a very busy schedule. You have a very busy schedule. How do you prioritize your time, and how do you prioritize your goals for what you're doing and how you're aiming to impact the world through, whether it's your speaking engagements or your book? And I think you had shared with me that you're starting your next book, you're starting to write your next book now, but how do you prioritize your goals? Just give the audience a little flavor for that. And there has to be certain things that give and certain things that get prioritized. What does that look like for you?
Wow, a couple things. Number one, I'll try to move through this pretty quickly. Number one is a morning routine. Establish and stick with a morning routine. And a lot of that is about making and keeping promises to yourself, whether it's moving, whether it's reading, whether it's your spiritual personal time. And the other thing I think is really important that I try to do every day is send an encouraging message to someone every single day. You never know where they're going to be. So that's the way that you kind of can close that circle. So take care of yourself, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and look out for this. That would be number one. Number two, I really try to focus things into 4 specific areas in my life, and I call them the 4 F's, the 4 quadrants: faith, family, fitness, and finances.
Sure.
And if I can keep things in that arena and organized that way, that really helps me. That's how I set my goals. That's how I think about the day. I think about the week, the month, the year.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I would also say that we're drummers. I don't believe in balance in life. I believe in rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Rhythm is everything.
And tempo. Because that, to me, what does that mean? And how would maybe somebody activate that? To me, it means there are times then things are going to have to spin faster than other things in your life. So it's sort of like keeping all the plates spinning. Some are going to have to spin faster. They can't all spin at the same speed all the time, or chaos is going to happen, right? Yeah. So those were kind of be the three things. And the other thing I think is that sometimes we have to build the puzzle without the box top.
Yeah.
We are not always going to be able to see that picture. And I think if we balance the 4 F's in our life, then things will weave together. And maybe that's not trying to control everything in my control. Like my faith is strong about that.
Of course.
That working towards giving before I get, and knowing what my goals are, like Zig Ziglar said, help enough people achieve their goals and you'll achieve yours.
Yeah.
I think are those things. So morning routine, kind of focus on quadrants. Don't try to break it down too much. And then when you think about life balance, understand that sometimes you might have to talk to your spouse or your kids and say, dad or mom has to be out for 2 weeks. And that's important for us.
Yeah.
So that will be a little bit more of focus, more intention there. And it kind of has to have an ebb and a flow to it.
Yeah, and the rhythm piece is because we do talk a lot about work-life balance and or imbalance as it may be sometimes. But I like what you said about the rhythm. Maybe it's less about this balancing act, right? Which can be very dangerous. And there's always going to be one side or the other that gets less of you. And it's more about the rhythm, right, and the routine. I was thinking, I was hoping you were going to talk about eighth notes on the hi-hat and ghost notes with your left hand on the snare. And
next show.
That's next show. That's right. But with all that being said, that's great, and I love that. And I think that just having the audience encapsulate that for a second, maybe thinking about it as it's more about rhythms and things that go through, because there's going to be ebb and flow, and that affects balance all the time.
Yeah.
So
I'd add one other thing to that, and I did a podcast with an amazing lady named Heather Parody, who is really about community and about creatives, and because there's, as a musician and as a business person and as an author, I kind of get this blend of I'm kind of a creative, but also there's the tactical, and I just love my time with Heather, and we did a podcast called Excellence versus Perfection. And I truly believe that we should seek excellence, and that if all we're seeking is perfection, then maybe overstated, but that can be a real problem.
Yeah,
in expectations of perfection, you certainly want to be your best self all the time, do your best work always, right? Yeah. You want to be diligent at it, but at the same time, you have to have grace, because we've been given grace without any reason for earning it. We have it, so we need to give it to ourselves as well.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'll check that podcast out. When you look at just your current goals right now, and I mentioned earlier, you're working on a book. You're starting to work on your next book, but what are your goals? And maybe it's the book, maybe it's something outside the book, but can you just share with the audience what current goals do you have for you and perhaps your family? Or
in general, I think in the big picture, it's potential. Helping myself as well as others, my goals are to help folks step into, and it's sometimes overstated, or you talk about this too much, but there's so much within us.
Oh, sure.
That just encouraging others to find that, and I'll also encourage myself to do that. So what does that mean, and what does that look like? That doesn't necessarily mean massive, audacious goals.
Yeah.
That might mean get 1% better tomorrow at something. Or give yourself some grace for a bad day.
Yep.
So, book, yes. I'm trying to help folks who are interested in doing more public speaking, whether that's in a TED environment or it's, how do I...
So are you coaching them?
I'm doing some coaching on presentations. I got a formula and a program that I do around how do you tell your story?
Yeah.
And how does it impact? How do you make an impact? And how do you make a call to action that relates? Because I think it's really important to be relatable in what you're doing so that you can be compelling and call to action. So I'm doing a lot of work there. Obviously the fitness stuff, there's always those personal things.
Oh,
I keep, I check numbers, how many times, in a row in a day did I do, that kind of thing. But, And I'm in that stage of life right now where, the kids are now pretty much launched for the most part.
Yeah.
So reinventing what that means in my relationship with my wife.
Yeah, for you and Bridget, right?
For me and Bridget, yeah, for Bridget and I. And I think that's always something that we need to stay fresh at, because we have to work at that. So not necessarily, 5 different specific things, but generally that's kind of how I look at my plate.
You were starting to touch on it, but just other things that maybe that you do. You talked about your rhythms and routines in the morning. Obviously, your reading and other things. But are there other things that you do just to help you just grow as a person and sustain?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I think time by yourself is really important.
So much.
And for me, one of the other things is just we garden. My wife's a chef, and we grow some things that we cook, but we also enjoy just being out in the space.
Yeah.
Like every Saturday morning, I do a walk and talk where I just go live and share my thoughts on Facebook about what's the word this week I want to focus on. Okay. That helps me keep what I'm doing. I do this for me. I have to remember that this is Bruce's therapy.
Sure.
To write this way.
Yeah.
And so there's really maybe one thing that I would add to that, and it's whatever you're doing. And I look at the word, I look at it 2 ways, and the word is commit. Making and keeping promises to yourself, even if they're little. And so commit, we write the words vertically.
Yeah.
Is count on me making it there. If you say that to yourself, in whatever those things are, whether you want to write a book, whether you want to spend more time with a spouse, whether you want to develop a new business or start something that's you're very, very passionate about, but that's one aspect to it, because you can commit to a healthy diet, and then I can high five you and say, I made that commitment. Let's go get a cheeseburger. That's right. You can celebrate the commitment by committing, but I think there's a way to activate that, the how part. Let me run through that real quick if we have a minute.
Sure, please do.
Count on me making it there is like I put the stake in the ground, right? Yeah. But the C, doing it another way, the C in commit is come every day with positive expectations. Okay. The O is own how we use our time. You had asked about that.
Yeah.
Block time. Make that time for yourself. Exactly. And that's not easy to do, right? The first M in commit is make promises to ourselves and keep them. I kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
That's for kids, self-confidence comes from making and keeping a promise to yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it's a behavior you want to do or if it's a commitment of a direction you're not going to go.
Sure.
Peer pressure kinds of things, right? So the second M is make growth and service the priority. Here's an example. Let's say that you want to improve your cardiology, your cardio, and you're going to do it by walking. Well, how can you serve others? Well, take a garbage bag with you. And every time you see a can or a piece of paper or something, you pick it up and put it in there. So you're serving others and you're committing to yourself as well. So you make service part of that commitment.
Sure.
And the I is invest in actions that move you to your goals. Ask the question, is it taking me where I where I want it? And it's okay if it's
important.
A no.
Yeah, it's so important to know, though, that is what I'm doing taking me towards whatever that goal is.
Correct. And then the last T is then realize with your realize the outcomes. So I think you got to visualize where you want to go. So to me,
I love it.
No matter what those things are, and they change because we have different seasons in life, that committing and then committing to the commitment means you're going to get there. Yeah. Whether it's a fitness program, whether it's reading more, whether it's nutrition, whether it's your spiritual aspect, whether it's your relationships, whatever your business, whatever those things are.
And I think also I want to touch on 2 things there. One is that it's okay that as we commit to something and we're going through it, know and even have the expectation and give yourself enough grace that there's going to be things that derail you. Get right back on. It's not, you haven't failed just because you've fallen off. Get right back on and keep going. My wife and I just got back from a trip out of town. We were very intentional about what this trip was about, and it was for her and I to connect on another level of talking about priorities and things in our family. What is not only what the rest of this current year looks like, but what does it look like for the next several years with our oldest daughter, who will be out of the house in 3 years or 3 to 4 years, I guess, and so forth and so on, and just other things that are going on in our lives that are creating chaos. And her and I have not had that opportunity. At least in our home, we don't have the ability most times to sit down in a meaningful way and commit to each other the things that we want to be able to do, and just talk through that, because it takes some synthesizing. And so you started off talking about just, first of all, you've got to take time, quiet time, alone time to think about these things, and then start to move towards how am I going to quote unquote commit to them. So it starts with really taking time away, getting outside the noise, in order to quote unquote see the forest through the trees and all of that. So, okay, a couple of fun things here. If you could go back in time, I like to call this my Back to the Future moment, or your Back to the Future moment. You get in with Marty into the DeLorean, and you go back in time and you get to meet your younger self. What kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I got to say, I took this from a friend in a conference that I did, and it blew me away. He was in 6th grade, great basketball player, but he didn't grow in the summer to middle school. And so when he got to middle school, everybody was all of that, right? He started doubting himself. So he went into the coach. This guy was 65 years old telling me the stories, and he was 15. So it was a 50-year-ago story, right? Went into the coach. He said, "Coach, I just don't think I can do this. I mean, everybody's tree tops above me, and my shot's not what it was, and my speed and all that kind of stuff." And I said, "What did he say to you?" He said, "It's always too early to quit." Ooh. That's what I would tell myself.
It's always too early to quit.
Always too early to quit.
Love it.
And the other part would be, you talked about the path, and mine is a faith-based path. So I don't necessarily know the outcome. Like I said, I don't get to see the box top of the puzzle, but I still am working on putting the puzzle together. If I stay on the path and continue to grow my faith relationship, I truly believe that there is a plan, and that I step into it and it reveals itself to me to be that person, to be all that God has intended me to be.
Indeed.
It's a everyday challenge.
Yeah.
Will I ever meet that? No, but it's always too early to quit.
That's great. Love it. That's such a good thing. Well, I was going to ask you any final thoughts or inspirations, but I think we just landed the plane with that. That was, doesn't get any better than that. Hey, my friend, that was great. That was great. I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on the podcast today, and I know our audience has learned so much. And I'm thankful that God has given you the passion to do what you're doing, to help others and to inspire others. Keep up the good work. Every day, I know, brings a new opportunity for you and a new opportunity for others, so keep up the good work. Again, if you want to learn more about Bruce Pulver and his mission to inspire others, check out his website, www.abovethechatterourwordsmatter.com. Kind of a mouthful. I think I said that right. And also, if you haven't done so yet, check out our first episode. And also check out his TEDx, Bruce Pulver, The Secret to Changing Negative Self-Talk by Renewing Your Mindset. To all of our subscribers out in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next episode, I pray that our daily journeys are filled with opportunities to lift others up as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everybody.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Berland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Berland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.